Hello, this is William Donahoo. I'm with Donahoo Associates, and we are attorneys that work in the area of prevailing wages and helping workers enforce the prevailing wage law and make sure they're getting paid their prevailing wage rate when they're working on a prevailing wage job. And what we want to do in this short video is talk about misclassification. And misclassification covers a number of different things. The first one, and probably foremost, is the project that somebody's working on require the payment of prevailing wages? If someone's working on a public works, or they're building a school or a police station or road, doing something that's paid for in full or in part with public funds, or maybe they're working on a solar project covered under AB 2143. Whatever it is, if it's a public works project or requires the payment of prevailing wages, and the person's not being paid prevailing wages, that's being misclassified. And they're entitled to, get paid what they should have been paid, and we can help them with that. Another type of misclassification are you being paid the right rate for the type of work that's being performed? So there's lots of different types of work. In the construction area, where prevailing wage is paramount, labor work, plumbing work, electrical work, iron worker work, inspection, land surveying. There's lots of different classifications of the type of work. And on a prevailing wage project, the worker is supposed to be paid the rate that's associated with the type of work they're doing. What do employers like to do? They like to pay the cheapest rate. So if someone's doing labor work, that's a lower rate than if they're electrical. And sometimes somebody will be paying prevailing wages, an employer will pay prevailing wages, but they'll pay the lowest rate. They'll pay everyone labor rate. Well, if someone's driving a tractor, that's an operating engineer rate, and it's higher than a laborer's rate. So if somebody is operating a backhoe and being paid a laborer's rate, they're being misclassified, and they're being misclassified into a lower rate, a lower hourly rate, and they're entitled to enforce the prevailing wage law and get the rate that is more appropriate to the type of work they performed. It's interesting, electrical, for example, someone's doing electrical work and they might be classified in low voltage telephone work. And those are two really different rates, but sometimes the worker doesn't understand that nuance, and the employer does, and they know that a telephone installer is a lot less expensive than a high voltage electrician, so they'll pay the lower rate. And if you think that's happening in your situation, give us a call and we can talk about it. The other thing that's really important is, that you should watch out for, is an employer might say, hey, what you're doing has no rate. It's a unique duty, it's a unique type of work, a specialized work, and the Department of Industrial Relations that sets the prevailing wage rates for different classifications hasn't set a rate for what you're doing or what this worker is doing. And so the employer will say, you're not entitled to prevailing wage. That's not true. Everyone working on a public works project, doing construction, alteration, demolition, maintenance, are entitled to a prevailing wage. And if the DIR hasn't determined one, then the way to determine which rate that worker should be paid is by what rate most closely resembles the work that's being performed. And so if the work is similar to inspection work, then building inspector will apply. If it's more closely resembles labor classification, then the labor rate applies. But if there's not a rate specifically determined by the DIR, that does not mean that you're not paid prevailing wages, and that would be a misclassification if you're not getting paid that. And then lastly, one of the areas that's very common is when you're doing multiple things. Let's say somebody's operating as a laborer, they're getting paid the prevailing wage as a laborer. But part of the cleanup is they run a backhoe. And so for 3 or 4 hours a day, they're running a backhoe. Well, that's not laborer's work. Operating equipment like that is called an operating engineer work or classification, and that requires the payment of the operating engineer rate. So, misclassification in summary: are you being paid prevailing wages for a prevailing wage job or not? That's misclassification. Are you being paid the rate that is proper for the type of work that you're doing? Are you being paid the classification or the rate that most closely resembles the work performed? And it's not the work that your business card says or the work that you were hired for. It's the work that you're doing and that you did. And then lastly, if you're working in multiple classifications in a given day, then you should be paid multiple hourly rates for the hours you work in those classifications. If any of these things apply to you or you have questions about, give Donahoo Associates a call, and we'd be happy to see if we can help you.